Mankind's exploration of space. Back in the late 1950s, we were in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. We didn't actually go into an all-out battle and launch missiles at each other, but we were threatening each other. We did have missiles pointed at each other, and there was a lot of political tension at the time. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union, they launched a satellite into space known as Sputnik. This guy up here. Sputnik, it was a radio transmitter basically, but it showed the Soviets' ability to get a satellite into space. It simply went around the Earth broadcasting a radio signal, and this was as much as a technological advancement, it was also a propaganda piece because everyone all over the Earth could verify that, yes, there was something in the sky that was broadcasting a radio signal, it just beeped. And this was a big deal because at the time, the United States, again, we were in the Cold War, and this showed, hey, if they can launch a satellite into space, they can launch other things into space, perhaps nuclear weapons. And this was a big issue. And so it started a thing called the space race for the advancement of technology to explore outer space. And so when the United States got on there, that's when NASA came on board. We actually launched our own satellite in 1959 called Explorer 1 after Sputnik. Sputnik was the first one. And NASA was created shortly thereafter. And then the Soviets updid us again, where they launched the first human being into space. This is Yuri Gagarin. He rode aboard the Vostok 1, launched into space. He didn't orbit the Earth, but he simply, it was like a cannon shot where he launched up into space and he got out of the Earth's atmosphere and then came back down. And again, this was a scary thing because it showed that the Soviet Union had the technology. They were pushing the space program, and they were farther along than we were, and this was a huge issue. So President John F. Kennedy, the Rice University speech came along, and he's like, all right, we got to do something here. We're going to have a plan. And yes, the Soviet Union's put the first satellite and the first human in space, but we're going to put a man on the moon. All right, and he said by the end of this decade, which this was in 1962, so by the end of the decade, it would have been 1969 would have been the last year of the decade before 1970. It's like, we will put a man on the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. It was a fantastic, it was called the Rice University speech, fantastic speech. So we started we had already started a space program, but we started these programs looking to get to the moon. The first program was known as the Gemini or the Gemini Project. It was a one-man space project, and then we started sending two people up. I'm sorry, the first one was the Mercury Project. I misspoke there. Mercury was the first one, Gemini was the second, and then of course Apollo is the third. And the Apollo project is the one that actually went to the moon. This is Apollo 11 right here, which was the first mission that landed on the moon. Here we see Buzz Aldrin walking down the platform. We know it's not Neil Armstrong because Neil Armstrong was the mission commander. He would have had red stripes on his sleeves and on his helmet to identify him as the mission commander. So this is actually Buzz Aldrin walking down the ramp. We went to the moon several times after that. We have not been to the moon since the 1970s. We've kind of stayed here close to Earth. We have lots of orbiting satellites now. This is the International Space Station. It's currently orbiting. It's the largest satellite orbiting the Earth right now, the largest man-made satellite. Don't forget the moon itself is a satellite. It's a natural satellite because anything that orbits another body in space they call a satellite. So the moon technically is the largest satellite, but this is the largest, definitely the largest man-made satellite. We have sent satellites and orbiters to other planets as well. We've only set foot on the moon. That's the only place we've been to outside of the Earth. But we've sent rovers and orbiters to all the other planets. All right. This right here is Curiosity. It's currently on Mars. This is it sitting on Mars. Very famous photograph where Curiosity extended its camera and turned it back on itself and took a selfie of itself sitting on Mars. So the first selfie ever taken on another planet was taken by a robot wandering around. There's other ones out there as well. There's Pathfinder and Spirit and Opportunity. We have quite a few rovers wandering around the lunar surface. and we're taking soil samples and measuring the atmosphere and doing all types of scientific research on there. This is probably the future right here. It's much more inexpensive and also much safer to send robotics to the other planets than it is to send human beings. All right, human beings need to carry food with them. They need to, build safer spacecraft to ensure, that they're not exposed to radiation in outer space. Where rovers don't have to worry about that. There is talks of sending humans to Mars eventually. There is talks about building a colony on the moon, and so there is talks about sending humans out there. But for right now, in the very near future, we are just primarily sending robotics as we expand ourselves into outer space.